Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. Super excited to have Oliver Browne here from True Summit Adventures. Oliver is the man when it comes to the mountain climbing, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, and both a little bit of the mechanics, but also just kind of what it's all about and why do people do that, and what's the drive behind all that. So, Oliver, so happy to have you here on the show.
Great. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah. And Oliver, everybody always wants to know where everybody's joining us from. So where are you today?
So I'm in Tirana, Albania, which is a small mountainous country above Greece and below Montenegro, the Western Balkans. I'm in the capital.
Visiting, or where do you live?
So I'm on the road a lot, but my base is in London. But I'm in Albania on a mission to see what it's like. My partner is Albanian as well, so we might be spending more times here. But there's a big load of mountains here as well, so we're going to go and check that out this weekend in the north of the country.
Very cool. What side? We're chatting in here November. So if I've got the math right, it's got to be kind of maybe getting cold in Albania, or what's the weather like?
Well, it's southern Mediterranean, you've got to think. So, it was t-shirt weather today. It was I would say 22 degrees, 22, 23. Okay. T-shirt weather. Right. I mean, in London it was about 8 degrees and raining, but here it was nice and sunny.
For those of us that are not Europeans or haven't spent a lot of time in Europe, sometimes it's hard for us to get in perspective where things are as far as latitudes and what the weather looks like.
I'd say we're about level with Rome, probably. So
okay.
if you took a line across from Albania, I expect you'd end up around somewhere in southern Italy, around maybe Rome. I would guess.
Right, and then I think that corresponds with in North America is probably somewhere around New York or something like that. And it's cold in New York right now, so I bet I'm not looking at a map. But anyway, so you're going to do some exploring, hopefully find some new things to discover and share with your clients. Everybody, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so Albania is actually becoming known for backcountry and heliskiing. So they have this area in the north of the country that is totally I think it's one of the wettest areas in Europe, but it's only 60 or 70 kilometers from the coast. So it produces this amazing snowfall above 2,000 meters. So I think the mountain goes up to like 2,800. But between 1,200 and 2,800, there is this incredible amount of snow that they get every winter. And it's become, it's getting a reputation as a kind of Alaska of Europe, where there's very heavy snowfall, pristine mountains to ski, and no infrastructure, nobody else. And there's 1,500 square kilometers to choose from. So that's kind of my focus for this winter is spend some time here climbing, do some backcountry skiing, hopefully some helicopter skiing, and find some new awesome things for my clients to do.
Very cool. So when you say no infrastructure, does that mean they have like no ski resorts, or it's all backcountry and heliskiing, or do they have a few options that?
No, nothing. There's no. this is a country they had communism here till 1990.
Yeah.
So they really, it's the beginning of not quite the beginning, but tourism is really only just started to pick up. Everything has to be built from scratch. So, there's no mountain lodges. There's, there was kind of some basic hotels in the area, but there's not. I was climbing in Slovenia last week, and there's a really sophisticated network of high mountain huts, some of which are even occupied during the winter. Some which just have this sort of emergency room, but in Albania there's nothing like that. So it's really a kind of pristine place for mountaineering and all mountain sports.
Very cool. Sounds like a great place to spend some time. So tell me one thing that everybody always wants to ask. We're gonna chat quite a bit about why people do what you do and what's behind it, and really the challenge that I'm going to say we as adventurous people are pushing ourselves to do things, whether that's just going someplace that's outside of our comfort zone or climbing a mountain or heliskiing. There's a variety of reasons why we do that. We're going to discuss that. And I think everybody always kind of wants to know, who is this guy? So, how did you get from whatever you were doing before this to where you are now? What was your story?
I always have done sports. I was a professional polo player when I was younger on horses. So I always had this kind of, we used to travel a lot for polo. I used to, I would play in the UK in the summer, and then I would play, around the world in the UK winter. So I've always, I had the travel bug since I was a teenager, really, partly from polo. I mean, I really saw a lot of the world through playing polo. I played in India, Pakistan, America, Argentina, South Africa, China. So, I always enjoyed traveling. When I finished,
how does someone get into polo? I mean, was that something your dad was doing, or that's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, there was no sort of precedent of anyone in my family having played. We had like ponies as a child. We used to ride around. I grew up in Hampshire, is a rural part of the UK, about 2 hours west of London. We had ponies, and we used to charge around on our ponies. And at some point, there was opportunity to go for a polo lesson, and I was like, okay. But I remember the first time I went and played polo, I held the stick. I remember just thinking like, I was hooked straight away. And I think that's actually what happened to me when I did mountaineering. I finished playing polo in 2014, 2015. And, I spent a few years working in a desk job in London. I got really out of shape. I was a kind of business development specialist. So I was always taking people for lunch, always meeting people for drinks. I had this sort of 3-year period. I think I must have put on about 20 kilos. I really changed. And at some point I kind of got sick of, being out of shape and tired. And I started running. And I think I did the London Marathon in 2017. No, maybe 2018. Anyway, straight away after it, I was like, I want to keep doing physical challenges. And I signed up for Kilimanjaro. And I did Kilimanjaro. And I had this sort of same epiphany that I had the first time I played polo. And I came down and I knew, I'm just going to be a mountaineer from now on. It was a very kind of like strong realization. And I've been doing, adventures pretty much full time ever since then. And I guess this has mostly been climbing, but I've done some other things as well. I rode the Atlantic last December and January. I've done some other ocean rowing. And I've done...
So when you say, Oliver, when you say you rode the Atlantic, you just kind of, I heard you say that kind of like I made a sandwich. It was like, yeah, I rode the Atlantic. But you rode a boat across the Atlantic? Am I hearing that right?
So I rode from the Canary Islands, which is just off the coast of West Africa. I rode a 4-man rowing boat with 3 friends to Antigua, 5,000 kilometers.
That's kind of a big deal. Yeah. Okay.
It was cool. It took 32 days, 13 hours.
And with, you said a couple of your friends, or how many were on the boat?
There was four of us. Yeah, it was a four-man team, four-man
Okay,
crew.
and you were friends before you started this, or you did that strengthen the friendship? Are you guys still talking to each other? What's
No, we're
that
still
like?
talking. It's very interesting actually. It's I think adventures are they're a great way to discover what your strengths and weaknesses are, and
Hmm.
they can give you a lens into what your nature's like, and they can also show you where you need to improve. So if you're somebody that gets stressed easily or gets emotionally dysregulated easily, this will be found out, or this will be shown very quickly during a tough adventure like that. I think more so even there than the mountaineering, because the mountaineering is if you're climbing, if you're doing Everest or whatever, it's a pretty slow and steady event. The cadence is very different to rowing the Atlantic. You might be at Everest Base Camp for 6 weeks, and you're actually only climbing for 5 days of that. The rest of the time you're just waiting for the right weather. You're doing your acclimatization hikes, but you might have a lot of downtime. And the bit that you get stressed isn't very. It's a very short period of time, and the times that you get really stressed, let's say, there's an avalanche warning, or, when I climbed Everest, not that I summited, but on my Everest attempt, we had two avalanches. One hit our camp, Camp 2, Mount Everest. And so that was stressful, but just for like 3 minutes. Whereas, rowing the Atlantic, I would say you never had that kind of, feeling of like imminent, disaster. But it was, stressful for a longer, more consistent period of time, and the fatigue is what really sets in, and so then you're trying to manage your own emotions, your own fatigue. You're trying to, manage what everyone else is doing, what everyone else is saying. So yeah, it's a very interesting experience. I loved it. I found it very straightforward. In fact, it was. I don't want to say it was simple, but it showed you how simple you can make things. It was, you have your role, and I was a rower. We had another guy who was a rower, but he was also responsible for the technical bits on the boat, the navigation systems, the communication systems, where I was a rower and I did the cooking. So
Okay.
in my 24 hours each day, I knew that I had to row for between 12 and 15 hours a day. I had to get as much sleep as I could in the times that I wasn't rowing, and I had to boil this water for the food. And
Hmm.
you can break this down into these 2-hour sections. So I write, for the next 2 hours I'm rowing, and then after that I've got an hour off. So I'm going to boil this water as quickly as I can, then I'm going to rest for 45 minutes. And you just keep going through those sections. And then,
Right.
you do that enough times, you'll get to the other side. So it was very straightforward. I can't I can't think of a time when I thought it was overly difficult. I enjoyed it. It's a very beautiful place, the Atlantic. I thought it would be busy with shipping, but we didn't see anything for 32 days really. A few boats here and there, but yeah, it was incredible.
Wow. So uh, I heard you say it was simple. And I've heard people say, and I've said it myself, like some things can be simple, doesn't mean they're easy, right?
Oh, that's true.
It's like, okay, it's a simple procedure, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. Maybe climbing, okay, we got to get up 1 foot out, 1 foot in front of the other. It's not necessarily rocket science, and I'm not a climber, so correct me if I'm just totally off base here. But you're moving 1 foot in front of the other, so that can be simple, but it's hard because of the stuff that's going on in your head. Maybe the pain, the discomfort, stuff like that. I would imagine. Um, what's the thing? Because you said that you learn a lot about yourself, and you have these moments, kind of like triggers, like when you're in a relationship or when you're with somebody. There's things that come up that trigger you, and those triggers are a gift, an opportunity for you to look at yourself and say, hey, what's this area that I need to improve on? And I would imagine, in my experience with adventure stuff and spending, time alone in other places, it's like those things come up, and it's that awareness of, oh wow, here's something I need to work on. That's a long way of asking you. on the rowing trip across the Atlantic, what was the one thing that came up for you that kind of surprised you or that you learned about yourself that you're willing to share with us?
I think, I think that if you do a big multi-day adventure like that, there won't be much that you don't learn about yourself during that time. So I think, for me, it was a great lesson was that if you prepare yourself, I'd never done any rowing before. I'd never considered myself a sea person. I'd always got seasick as a kid. Hadn't really been around, I like swimming in the sea at the beach, but I wouldn't consider myself I'd never done any sailing. But it was, an example of where you can get to. And we became quite competent. It was a race with 44 boats. We came second in the race. We nearly won.
Oh, wow.
It was a good case where if you commit to something and you prepare really well, you can get very good at something. And so I think that was a great lesson. I was like, wow, we really, we made a plan and we executed it really well. So you can get a lot of confidence from that, especially if you're, the other things that you're doing in your life, you're starting a business, I started my adventure business 2 years ago. I didn't know much about marketing. I still don't know that much about marketing. I was an adventurer. I was a guide. I'd done a lot of climbing. I knew a lot of routes, but I didn't know about I didn't know about accounts. I didn't know about CRM. I didn't know about any of these things. But from having done adventures and done big projects like the Atlantic Row, I was like, well, I could probably learn that.
Figure it out. Yeah,
I could probably make a roadmap. And the more that you enjoy doing something. For me, when I was doing also because I played sport professionally, so I'd been coached, and I think that would really help me. The other guys hadn't been coached so much, so having a coach who had a coach who was very professional, he was a very serious guy, but he was very demanding, and so some of the guys didn't like being told what to do or didn't like having this thing prescribed to them. Whereas for me, I was like, wow, we've got this guy, and he's putting all this time into me. I loved it. And the guy would call me every day and he was like, look, I'm looking at your workouts and why is this happening? And, instead of some people were a bit like, hey, why, what's all this questioning? Whereas for me, I really embraced that. I was like, wow, we've got a coach. This guy is committed to making me a better performer. And I really enjoyed that part of it. So if you ever get the chance to be coached and you can allow yourself to be coached, it'll be the best you can get yourself to, I would say, from my experience anyway. The times when I've had the most coaching is when I've performed the best.
Yeah, and it makes absolute sense, but a lot of people have resistance to that. I've been involved in coaching both on the receiving end and the giving end, and it's. I mean, if you look at anybody, look at the Tiger Woods, the Magic Johnsons, the LeBron James, everybody that's really good at what they do, that's coach. And it's not about necessarily, the coach doesn't necessarily need to be more talented than you in certain areas. Tiger Woods' coach is presumably not more talented as a golfer, but it's that accountability. It's just having somebody else that can see your weak spots, that can sit back and watch your swing or, look at your workouts and see the gaps that you maybe either don't see or you don't want to see because we play all kinds of tricks with ourselves to avoid things that we don't want to do. And so I think that's great advice. I'm curious because you said that when you started polo, like you put the stick in your hand and you're like, okay, yep, this is it. And then you said, when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, you had kind of the same experience. Yep, this is it. Did you have that experience rowing across the Atlantic? Are you going to do it again? Or was that just okay, I did that, but
no, I think no, I mean, when I first went ocean rowing, I did that because I'm an adventurer full time, and that was an Everest level event. I'm doing mostly climbing, but when there was an opportunity that arose for me to do it, I got invited into the team. Initially, I said, "Listen, I don't think I can because I'm climbing, and I don't want to get derailed from that." But the person that asked me was a friend of mine. They nagged me a little bit, and eventually I said, "Well, look, this is an Everest level event, and if I do climb Everest, which I hope I will, there's only about 3 or 4 people that have climbed Everest and rode the Atlantic. So
Cool.
It's a very small club that you get into. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not in a rush to do it again. Somebody sounded me out about doing it again recently, and I'm not particularly enthusiastic for it. It's a totally different training to the training that I do, the training that I like. I gained 10 kilos when I did it. I had this, I had a climber's body before, and then I suddenly I had, lifting weights and doing the indoor rower. I gained 10 kilos. I had this huge upper body strength. So I've been spending the last year trying to sort of get a bit lighter, in fact, because it's not, when you're going uphill. I went straight from the Atlantic Road to an expedition in Ecuador, and everyone said to me, "Oh, you'll be so fit after the row," and I really struggled. And maybe because I was tired, but also because instead of being 85 kg, I was 95 kg, and I had this.
Well, you're going from sea level.
Well, that too. Yeah. But yeah, I think I had to carry this like extra weight that I created. Yeah. So, I never say never. If somebody invited me for, into a team that you could get the world record, or you could definitely win the race, then, or a world first, then I'd be interested. But as it is, I'm sticking to my mountaineering is what I like doing. But it was a beautiful thing, and it's good to do new things.
Yeah. So, like we were just talking about, you mentioned, there's differences between rowing and climbing, different set of muscles, different set of just stuff. If you're talking to, as you meet people and talk to people that are interested in adventure stuff, presumably some of your clients, potential clients, friends, you're just out and about circulating. How long does it take for you to figure out what type of adventure sport maybe somebody would be well suited for? Does that come to you naturally? Like, do you meet people and say, "Oh my gosh, you'd be a great climber," or "You should be doing this," or "You should be doing that," or is it more complicated than that?
Well, I tell everybody that I meet they should climb Kilimanjaro. I think there's very few people in the world that listen, maybe if you're too old or too young or you're infirm, but I would say that most people between the age of 15 and 65 could climb Kilimanjaro, and should. I think it's one of the best things you can do in your lifetime. So that's I tell everybody that you should climb Kilimanjaro. I think it's one of the best things you can do. I've done it 5 times now. I love it every time I go. I
hear you saying that. Why do you say that? I hear you saying it is one of the best things you can do, but tell us more. Why do you think that?
I think for people that haven't climbed before, it's just got everything. It's a proper challenge. It's the right amount of hard. I think if it was less hard, it wouldn't be so attractive. If it was harder, it wouldn't be so attractive. So it's the right amount. It's right in the sweet spot of hard. Yeah. It is a beautiful place. The people that work there are incredible. There's, I think, all mountain communities have great people, but Kilimanjaro is really special. There's so much singing, sort of, it's just wonderful. So yeah, everything's good about it. The immersion in nature, the challenge itself, and the people that you do the experience with. Yeah, it's incredible.
What's the top tip that you would give to somebody that it's in that situation? They haven't done any climbing. They're like, okay, Kilimanjaro. Oliver said I should do Kilimanjaro. What's the top 1 or 2 tips that you would give them, or something that they wouldn't just know that they should know before they go?
I think the main thing, if you go prepared, then you're going to enjoy it more. So, if you are, 20 kilos more than you really should be, you need to lose 10 to 15 before you go.
Okay.
Try to get fitter. So just give yourself ample time. So, if you're, someone that doesn't do much hiking, then give yourself 9 months to a year. Don't give yourself 2 or 3 years, because you'll lose interest in that time. Give yourself, a time frame where it's manageable. You've got enough time to get ready, but not so much time that you're going to lose interest and get distracted. So, if you're going from a standing start, you want to be doing it, 9 months to 12 months later, and you want to try and, prepare yourself in such a way to give yourself a really good chance of summiting. So, lose weight if you're overweight. If you're, unfit, get as fit as you can. If you haven't done much hiking, you need to do, a lot more in preparation. And you need time to build it up so that you can, you won't get injured in the process. If you go from 0 to 100 miles an hour, then you'll end up getting injured and losing interest. But, if you can just consistency and patience are the two key ingredients to training. So at the moment, I just started a new cycle of training, and my temptation is to get into the gym, go, literally go for it. And I, in my mind, I know that this is at least 3 months that I want to spend, getting into shape and then accelerating in months 4 and 5. It's a 6-month project. So, at the moment, I'm just taking it easy. This week I had flu. I went to the gym yesterday. I just did a very slow run, didn't get my heart rate up, just because, if you overdo it, then, you'd miss a week because, you didn't recover from flu. So patience and consistency are the two most important things for me when I'm training. So, you need to give yourself time to get into shape, but not try to rush it.
I suspect you probably have seen a scenario like this, or you can maybe with your clients, where you've got a husband and wife, or you've got 2 brothers, father, son, any combination you want to put together, where one of them's like, oh my gosh, this is on my bucket list. I'm going to go climb Kilimanjaro, but I want someone to go with me. And sometimes we get caught up in talking other people into going with us. So I can envision, leading group trips up mountains. What do you say to people that are thinking about trying to talk someone into going that isn't already driven to do it? Is that a huge mistake? Or is there a way to do that in a way that doesn't destroy your relationships? Or do you have any stories you want to share with us?
I think it's a good question. I think, if you're a father, son, or a mother, daughter, son, or a father, daughter, I think if you can do one of these events with your siblings, it'll be the best thing you ever do together. Unless your child is so disinterested, or, if you have to really, really make them. But if they've shown, some degree of excitement or enthusiasm for doing it with you, then I would say that it'll end up being the best thing that you ever do together, bar some kind of disaster, illness, tooth infection, etc. But typically, I would say it would be the best thing you ever do. I think I think you've got to give people encouragement, but there's no point taking someone that doesn't want to be there. And so when people call me and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I'm very reluctant to talk people into any of my expeditions, and similarly with people that I know, friends, or, people there's people that I know that it would be hugely beneficial for them to come on one of my expeditions, either because they need I can see that they need a break, or they need a break from, whatever environment that they're in that's not doing them any good. I can see that they need to come, and it would be hugely beneficial for them, but I don't waste any time trying to talk them into it. I say to people, this is what I'm doing. People see on my Instagram, but I'm very reluctant to really push people into it. I want people to come, they're already accepting. The door is open, they're just walking through it. But I think it's, right. Offer people encouragement, say to them, look, it'd be great for us to do this together, I think. But, I don't try to push people too hard. People fall through the door when they're ready, I find,
Yeah, and I spoke with another gentleman that in Guatemala, and they do some volcano treks down there, and he put it really well. He's like, yeah, you just kind of got to want it. If you don't want it, don't sign up for it. And that conversation came up because I was traveling with my son in Guatemala the summer before last. And it's called Mount Fuego, where you can see the lava coming out of the top of the mountain, and everybody was so excited. And I was like, oh, we got to do this. But I had that moment of, my son, he's 15-year-old teenager. And he, it was like, yeah, I could just envision 15 minutes into the hike. He's like, okay, I'm done now. And I was like, I just didn't want to do that to our relationship, because I would have been totally, I'm like, oh no, we spent the money, we're going. And but now as he gets older, a little bit more mature, I feel like I could take him back and we could have a much better experience. So I think it is important not to over push sometimes. So appreciate sharing that. And that was a fairly selfish question that I asked because I do some marketing work. I actually work with a company that does Kilimanjaro tracks. And I was talking to my dad the other day, and he's like, son, that's on my bucket list. I've always wanted to climb Kilimanjaro, and nothing would be better than to climb it with you. And so when are we going? When are we going? And it was kind of a moment of I'd already been thinking about going, but as soon as you've got like a family member, especially father son dynamics and all that, as soon as like, man, if I tell him yes, we're going to do it, then we're going to do it. And it was interesting that when you get somebody else involved, there's that accountability. It's kind of like having a coach. So maybe there's something good there. I don't know, but
Yeah,
so thanks for that.
You definitely should. I would say, when in all the adventures I've done, I've never tried to talk somebody into it. Like when we had the Atlantic Row, we were looking for people. We signed up people, we lost people, we talked to a lot of people, we auditioned people, and I didn't try to talk anybody into it. I was like, if you want to do this with me, I'd be glad to do it with you. But I was looking for someone that was like, I want to go to this, to this place with you. Similarly with my climbing, I've done a lot of climbing by myself because, if you wait around for other people, you never go. And when I first started climbing, I went, I went so deep into it so quickly. And, people were like, wow, you're really into climbing, but who do you go with? And I go by myself. And they were like, why? And I said, well, if I was waiting for
wants to go.
Well, it's too complicated. It's you got to find, they got to, there's too many bits that got to fit together. So I literally would just, I'm one of the first big trips I did was to Ecuador. I found a guide online, and he said, I've got an expedition starting next week, or it was in 3 days' time. He's like, you can join it. I was like, I'll be there.
Actually, that's a really good point that comes up, because that happens with a lot of different types of adventure travel, or even travel in general. Is there's a lot of people out there that just have that, they call wanderlust, whatever. They just got to go. I'm definitely like that. It doesn't mean everybody in your world is like that. And it can be, really tough to find. So I love what you said about signing up for an expedition that's already going. And I think that might be an opportunity for people to get involved. So like on your expeditions, can single people just sign up for that? What tips would you give to somebody that's like, man, I'd love to do this, but nobody in my world is ever going to do it? How can they go about meeting the right people and maybe joining an expedition that's already going?
So there's lots of, there are a lot of operators, so what I did when I first, started, I in my mind, I had the expeditions that I wanted to do. So, I first did Kilimanjaro. I did Kilimanjaro. I loved it. I just Google searched. And at the time I didn't have a lot of money. So my main concern was price point, so I was just looking for the cheapest, most what looked credible from their website, what I could make out. And I didn't think too much about it. I was just like, okay, I want to go. And I did a bit of research. I found out what I considered to be the best route from what I could find out online, and then I found a company that was doing a trip at around the time that I wanted to go. But I could have gone with 10 companies that I Googled. Then I wanted to do. Then I think the more that you get into it, and you get more immersed into it, then you have, for example, straight away after Kilimanjaro, I was like, well, I want to climb Mont Blanc, because, I understand that Kilimanjaro is amazing, but it's not technical. It's just a hike. I wanted to get into technical climbing, alpinism. And we have Mont Blanc in Europe. So I was like, now I'm going to climb Mont Blanc. So I did my research, and, I was looking at the different Mont Blanc climbs. And at the time I was super fit. And I was like, well, I don't want to do the classic, 3-day thing. I want to do a single day ascent where you go from the bottom to the top. So then I started Googling, the guides in Chamonix. And I think I messaged 10 people. And the only guy that wanted to do, all the companies said, sorry, we don't offer that single day ascent. And the only guy that came back to me was this British guy, Ben Bradford, who's an IFMJ guide. He said, I've never done that, but I've always wanted to. I'll do it with you. And so that's how I ended up getting with him, So the more you get into it, the more you'll understand the style that you want to do it, the mountains that you want to hit. And then you can, then you'll start meeting people. But, for example, I'm going to go climbing in Ethiopia next year. I don't know anybody in Ethiopia. So I've just been Googling and I'm looking at companies and I'm, looking about the kind of itinerary that I want to go on. And so that's what I advise to people is that if you don't know a company or a guide, or you haven't got a friend that's done it, they can't recommend you anyone. Obviously that's best. Then you've just got to, try and sift through and work out who is good.
Yeah. And frankly, that's part of why we're doing this podcast, right, Oliver? Is opportunity for it. So anybody that's listening to this now knows somebody that does climbing, that knows some climbs that can have a conversation with them. And I know that you're happy to have that conversation. As a matter of fact, we're going to have your link, to your website and contact details in the show notes. And we're doing that with a bunch of different types of activities, different places as well, because yeah, if you don't know somebody in an area, it's and even if somebody goes to we do an interview here on the podcast, we post that interview on their website, you have an opportunity to hear somebody and connect with somebody, maybe watch the video version as well, because I think a lot of the stuff is about personal connection. Do you feel connection with the person, right?
I agree with you. And so one thing I would say on this, and perhaps that people don't realize, and I didn't realize this at the beginning, is that there are a lot of people that you think are the operator, but they're actually just a reselling agent. Mm-hmm. And you think you're signing up for them, but they have actually just bought your tour from another operator. And when you look at the T's and C's, you find out that that's not actually your operator, and that there's another company. You could have actually gone to them direct and got a cheaper price. And so what I would say to people is try to speak to your expedition guide. So all my trips, they're either guided by me or one of the guys that works for me. I'm not reselling anyone else's trip. So I encourage people, call me. Let's talk through the expedition. You can see that if you get a good feeling for how I do things or how I'm going to do it, then you'll also, it'll give you confidence. But whichever company that you go with, I would always try and speak to your expedition guide or the CEO of the company and say, well, who's going to be running this expedition? And if they can't tell you who it is and how they do it or why they like them, then I would look for another operator.
I think that's a great point you bring up. I can see both sides of it. I've been around in the world long enough in marketing and with adventure tourism to see both sides of it. And I agree. If the operator that is doing the tour, the guy that's leading the trip up the mountain, is readily available and can have conversations and has ways to take deposits and manage the business end of it, then great. And there's also other scenarios where that person that's leading the tours knows that they're not good at that stuff. They don't want to get involved in that stuff. So they do work with other tour operators that put together trips for them. So I can see where it could work both ways. And I agree with you completely. You don't probably want to be booking a trip like this through somebody that's sitting in a call center in India. Their website looks like they're the ones walking up the mountain with you, but people you're talking to really have no idea what it's all about. It's just get your money and send you down the road type of thing. So thanks for sharing that.
I think look, I wouldn't say that's always the case. If you're just doing a one-day experience and it's a pretty generic trip and it's cheap, then it's less important. But if you're going to be with somebody for 9 days, you're doing a significant challenge with them. I think it's good to get a feel for how they do it, especially if you're and it all depends on your own level. Like when I did Kilimanjaro, I was in this phase where I was super fit. I was super unafraid of anything. I didn't really care who the people that was, because I was like, well, I'll manage myself if they're useless. Yeah. But if you're, let's say you're older or you're newer to the outdoors and you need a bit of a confidence boost, then you should definitely have a more bespoke trip and try to get hold of your guide, and they will give you the confidence. They might even give you training tips. You'll be able to, like my clients, they all have my WhatsApp. I spend a lot of time fielding questions about kit, and I love it. I love to see that people are, getting the right stuff, and I like to feel that people are getting, looked after by me, and that's I'm providing value for them, because my trips are a bit more expensive than other people's. So, it's a case of also what you need, and at that time when I did Kilimanjaro, I didn't need much. I was like, well, I'm going to go, I'm going to be, very not aggressive, but I was just super fit. I was fearless. I didn't, I was like, well, if they're useless and they got rubbish food, I'll manage. I didn't care really. So it just depends what it is you need. And if price point is your main thing, you just want it as cheap as possible, then the reselling agents are great like that, because you'll find lots of trips that are really cheap, that run the whole time. You get a huge amount of variation on dates, etc. But if you're looking for something that's a bit more curated, a bit more bespoke, and you're prepared to pay for it, then that's when you need a kind of more curated experience and speak to the guide. So I'm not totally against the reselling agents or the platforms. They've got a place too, but it's for people looking for that need less hand holding.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. And that's kind of what I think, for me anyway, is part of what separates kind of the adventure tourism from the mass tourism. That you're not booking a cruise ship, you're booking a trip up a mountain, and it's not always about the money. A lot of times it's just about the time. Because we talk about being price sensitive, but if you only have a couple weeks vacation every year, that's just as important to most people, or sometimes more important than the amount of money they're spending. So you want to make sure that you're going with the right person, that you're going to have a good experience, because it's the time as well. So last time we spoke, you'd said something about just kind of the way things evolve in adventure sports and climbing, mountaineering, around kind of ethics and people. And you suggested that we touch on that. I'm not sure exactly what you had in mind to share on that, but as you've been in this a while, what are you seeing going on in the landscape that concerns you, or what do you think that we as an industry need to do to keep things moving in the right direction?
Well, I think I think ethics and sustainability are they're hot topics in adventure travel at the moment. I think probably at the time there'd just been the accident on Shisha Pangma, so that was probably at the forefront of my mind. But I think fair wages for operators that so typically like the countries that I'm operating in, Nepal, Kilimanjaro, Tanzania, Ecuador, these are third world countries, developing countries, and so there are unscrupulous operators, logistics managers, and I think there are cases where people don't get paid fairly, don't get looked after properly. It can be the porters, they're being made to carry too much weight, or whatever it might be. So I think it's important to try and find people that are doing things in the right way, and that means people that are conscious about the environmental impact of their tours, whether and also the impact on the local communities.
Is that something you just get kind of a feel for when you're researching operators, having conversations with them? Are there kind of like red flags or key things that people should be looking for if they don't know any better, or is it just a gut feel?
I think it's it's hard for people that are in retail, so to speak. For me, I'm buying, let's say I'm buying the trips wholesale. So I have partners in each country that effectively are, they are selling me their logistics. And, I've had operators that, they say, well, we adhere to these standards, and, this is, for example, in Kilimanjaro, there's a set of rules as to what, people should be paid, etc. And people can say that they're adhering it to, and maybe they will, but then, you do that trek with that company or with that logistics partner, and then you hear on the ground that, no one's being paid on time. And so, it is very difficult to work out, who are the good guys, who's paying people properly, who's paying people on time. I think it is very difficult to find that out.
Right. No, absolutely. What else do you think? What else is important to have in this conversation? Because we've covered quite a few different things. And for anybody that's listening to this, what have we left out? What do you think is important to discuss, either about mountaineering or just adventure sports in general?
Well, I think if I would just encourage everybody, get as many adventures in as you can. You'll never regret doing an adventure. I went to Peru in the summer. I went to climb Alpamayo. I ended up not climbing Alpamayo. I ended up climbing Chopicalchi, which is a 6,000er. It was, it was a great time, but my climbing partner, he got sick on the summit night. We ended up not summiting, but it was still an amazing trip. I had this most incredible experience. So it doesn't matter necessarily. You might always get the outcome that you want, but I'll never regret going to Peru, having that experience. I loved it. So, I would just encourage people, if you're thinking about having an adventure, whether it's, whatever it might be, climbing, trekking, or, there's so many different things that you can do, or even these multi-activity adventures that you do in Patagonia and these places where, you have a day's white river rafting, and then you do a horse riding, whatever it might be. I think people will never regret having had these experiences. And I think, you need to just get out and have as many of them as you can. And that's all I'm trying to do, really, is plan incredible experiences for myself, for my clients, and just to enjoy them.
Very cool. Very cool. Love that. So we're going to have your contact details in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Are there any big trips or big developments that you mentioned what you're doing in Albania. If you were to give a recap of the types of trips you offer and things that you're excited about, just real quick, what are you offering your clients?
So my next adventures are I'm with a private group in Slovenia, and then I've got a big expedition to Kilimanjaro over New Year's Eve, and that will be amazing. I think it's a great time of year to go. I think New Year's Eve it'll be even more special.
Nice.
Then we're going alpine climbing in Ecuador. That's in January and February. And then we start the spring season in Nepal. So we do an Everest Base Camp trek, and we do 6,000ers like Lebuche and Mira Peak. And, we'll have Kilimanjaro running at the same time. So there's a kind of mix of things. I also do bespoke trips and corporate adventures. So there's a lot happening. There's something for everybody, I think. But if you're looking for a starting point, then Kilimanjaro is the one. It's an incredible experience.
Very cool. Well, I may be there around the same time you're talking about, so maybe we'll meet on the mountain or share some experiences. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you all for coming on the show and sharing some of your stories and
my pleasure.
Kind of thoughts on all this stuff, and look forward to working together with you on some projects in the future. So thank you so much, all. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.